Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this information session for first year students. My name is Lisa Johnson and I'm the Assistant Dean for International Study. And I'm shortly going to turn the floor over to Sydney, who is our peer advisor. That I wanted to welcome everybody. This is a good time to start thinking about study abroad or continue thinking about study abroad, especially as you're considering course registration this week and so on and so forth. We'll be presenting some information, but we'll also have time at the end for a question and answer. So please don't hesitate to let us know if you have any other questions. And without further ado, Sydney, why don't you take things over for us?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Hi, guys, and welcome. My name is Sydney. I'm a senior, and I study environmental science and policy, and I am the study abroad peer advisor. So what that means is basically that my job is to help students through the study abroad process, sort of from the very beginning to the very end. So I'm going to go through a presentation and just sort of walk us all through like kind of bare bones, like the process of studying abroad at Smith, and then also what it might look like for you in your own journey to study abroad. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oops. There we go. All right. Are you guys seeing Study Abroad 101 for first years?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, Study Abroad 101 for first years. Everything you need to know to get started. So start off with a quick Q&A question, why study abroad? And the answer is, of course, because it's super, super cool. And also on a slightly more serious note, studying abroad allows you to spend a couple months living somewhere new. It allows you to get international perspectives on subjects you're interested in or subjects you might be studying back home at Smith. You'll meet new people. You'll get away from Smith for a little bit, which, trust me, when you're a junior will sound very attractive. And you'll just have a great time. So I'm going to walk through sort of as I've identified the major components of studying abroad. And then at the end, we'll come back to sort of some of the really major details that as first years you need to be focusing on. So step one, getting started. The first thing to think about, of course, is choosing your program. And there's a lot that can go into choosing your program. So this is a really good time to start to think about what types of programs you might be interested in. Our programs are located all over the world, and they cover a really big range of big, small, urban, rural, lots of different subjects, language intensives, programs that don't have a language requirement at all. So really, it's, the world is your oyster, and this is a really good time to start to think about what type of program you might be interested in and where you might like to study. So some tips about thinking about choosing your program. One tip is that your department or your major advisor probably has some cool suggestions. Uh-oh, I'm hearing thunder. Your major, your advisor or your department probably have suggestions of programs that they, as that department, recommend and typically send their majors on. And then also you will know that your department will for sure accept credits from that study abroad program. That being said, you don't have to study abroad within your major. And I'll stress that again. You can get credit or not get credit for whatever you like while you're abroad. But if studying abroad within your interest area is something that you would like to do, this is a good place to start. And another really big one that we'll also come back to later on is to start thinking about what language requirements you might need for the programs you might be interested in. So I'm going to walk through, we have 4 common types of program that we have approved, and I'm going to walk you through those 4, not because I think that you should say like, oh, I for sure need to study on a field study program because that's the only, type that's right for me, but rather just to sort of give you a sense of the different models of program that are out there and to help you start to think about, what are even the options. So the first type of program I'm going to highlight is a field study program. And like the name suggests, field study programs are really small and they have a really specific theme. Within that theme, there's a lot of structure and a lot of emphasis on non-traditional learning. Right, so one example that I want to highlight is South Africa Community Health and Social Policy. So as the name suggests, you would spend that semester probably with a group of like 20, 25 other study abroad students, all studying community health and social policy in South Africa, for example. That emphasis on non-traditional learning would also take you outside the classroom, right? So in a field study program, you would have classroom time and you would have dedicated classes, but also as part of your program, you'll probably have guest speakers, field trips, excursions, other experiences put together by the program that would help you investigate that theme. So the other example I want to highlight here is the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies, which is where I studied abroad. It's, as it suggests, an environmental studies program in southern Israel. Arava is a little bit bigger than some other field study programs. We had about 60 students, but we all were studying environmental studies and sort of peace building and international cooperation in a politically unstable region. Okay, so the next program, the next model I'd like to highlight is the Study Abroad Center. And these programs are sizable. They're about the same size as Smith usually. And these are centers that are specifically for study abroad students. And given that, they'll have a really wide range of courses you can pick from. But the interesting thing about those courses is that because they're all catered specifically for study abroad students, they're going to have a lot of emphasis also on non-traditional learning. It won't just be like being in the classroom at Smith. There will also probably be some sort of field trip, excursion, something built into it. And the biggest example of this kind of model we have is DIS in Copenhagen. And I also want to stress here, the examples that I'm highlighting are really just examples. I'm not, highlighting DIS in Copenhagen for any particular reason other than that it's just, the best example that we have of a study abroad center. And I think that it highlights this kind of model really well. All right, the next type is an integrated study abroad center, which is a lot like the regular study abroad center, except that you're affiliated with a local university. So you'll have sort of like a home base of a study abroad center, but you'll also be taking classes simultaneously at a local university, often in the local language. So a typical model for this might be you would take 2 classes at the study abroad center with the other study abroad students in English, and then your other 2 at the local university in the local language with local students. And these programs are often run, not often, but not always, run by American universities. So a great example of these are all of the Smith programs abroad, like Smith in Paris. And then another example is CIEE at Yonsei University in South Korea. That one's not run by an American university, but it is an integrated study abroad center. And finally, the last type of program we have is called direct enroll. And again, like the name suggests, this is a type where you will directly enroll in a university and live like a student there as an exchange student for the semester. So these are mostly large universities in mostly English-speaking countries. And if you were to look at it sort of like as a continuum, these would be the programs that have the least amount of like individual support, but also the most amount of independence. So an example of a direct enroll would be like University of Edinburgh or University of Melbourne, and you would just get to live like as an exchange student there for the semester. So within those 4 models, or outside of those 4 models, we have over 100 programs approved that you can study abroad at. So how do you start to pick a program? Great question. So there are 2 major resources that we usually point students to help them find and choose their program. The first one is this. This is our list of programs. And this is just the beginning, as you can see. There's like 2 full pages of this list. So this one is really helpful because it just, literally lays out all the programs that we have and sorts them by location. It doesn't tell you a ton about the program, but actually looking at this list can tell you a little bit more than you think, right? Just like reading the names of these programs will tell you a lot about their structure. And because you know now what each of the structures means, you can know sort of more or less what your experience will be like, right? Like, let's look at the very first one, Cameroon, SIT Development and Social Change. Given how specific that title is, you know that Cameroon, SIT Development and Social Change will be a field study program where you'll spend the semester learning about exactly that. It'll be small, there will probably be independent research, and it'll be a very guided program. Versus, let's look over here under China, Middlebury Schools Abroad, Beijing, for example. That's going to be an integrated study abroad center. So you know that in that program, you'll have the home base of a center run by Middlebury, but then you'll also probably be affiliated with a local university. So you'll have sort of a mix of experiences with a program like that. And then also you can see in the parentheses after each of the programs are a bunch of letters. I get a lot of questions about those. And there is a key at the very bottom of this document that I'm just not showing right now. Most of those letters refer to when you can go abroad, right? Like F and S is fall and spring. And then the E and then the E's with the different asterisks are about language requirements. So then when you've looked at that list or when you have sort of an idea of what region you might want to study abroad in, the next resource that we often point students to is our search programs function on our website called Sites. Excuse me. So Sites is our study abroad portal. It is where you will eventually send in your study abroad application, but it also has this awesome search programs function, where as you can see, you can enter all your different criteria up here, and then it'll filter. You can click on a program, it'll tell you a lot more about it, and it will also link you to that program's website where you can like really start to learn more about it. So another thing to think about while you're choosing your program is planning for a healthy and affirming experience. Studying abroad will make you think about your own identity, and you know, your identity might intersect in a way that's different from home, and that may bring up new experiences. Some destinations might be more or less accepting than what you're used to. And as we say on our study abroad website, no place is monocultural, and learning about difference by living and studying outside the United States can bring new insights upon return. Ask questions, explore resources, and remember that all cultures have complexities, and finding opportunities to successfully live in another culture is extraordinary. If thinking about your identity while you're abroad or planning for a healthy experience is something that you're concerned about or would like to talk more about, you can check out our study abroad website for resources, or you can set up a meeting with Dean Johnson to talk more about this. Another thing to keep in mind, and I'll touch more on this later, is that when you go to apply for Smith approval to study abroad, you can apply for up to 2 programs. So with that said, if you're worried about how your identities might intersect in a certain location, you can apply for 2 programs in 2 different places to give yourself a little bit more flexibility in which program you'll ultimately choose to go on. All right, step 2 to go abroad, funding. This is the fun one. So I'm going to read this long thing from our website, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what it actually means. So funding. Smith College strives towards equity in education across campus. In recognition of this policy, students studying abroad for Smith credit are generally billed and aided as if they were on campus. The student is billed the Smith comprehensive fee, tuition plus room and board, and Smith will directly pay the tuition and room and board charges assessed by the study abroad program. This is true regardless of whether the study abroad program charges are more or less than the Smith comprehensive fee. If your financial aid package includes a campus work award, i.e. work study, it will be removed for the semesters that you are studying abroad. Additional loan funding may be available through SFS to replace your canceled campus work award. So in sum, you will pay your regular tuition and fees, and Smith will take care of the rest. Sort of the rest being anything that would be covered normally if you were at Smith, right? So that includes things like housing, food, like local transportation around, you know, the immediate area. If those things are not covered by your program, you can apply for a stipend from Smith, and you also may be eligible for an airfare stipend if you are on financial aid. All right, step 3, applying. I am not going to spend a ton of time on the application process because it is still close to a year away for you guys, but I will just sort of give you a brief overview so you know what to expect. So applying, there are 2 steps to apply to study abroad. The first is that you have to apply for Smith approval, and then the second is that you have to apply for acceptance into your specific program. And you don't have to do that in that order. I shouldn't have said first and second. But another way to think of it is you have to apply to Smith to leave and apply to your program to arrive. Applying for Smith approval is super easy. You will do it in Sites in that portal that I showed you earlier. Again, you can apply for approval for up to 2 programs. And those deadlines fall in the February of your sophomore year. And there's always some confusion about this. There is only 1 deadline per year. So even if you want to go abroad in the spring of your junior year, that deadline is still in the February of your sophomore year. So a little bit less than a year from now. And then the second component, applying to your program. The application process for specific programs varies really widely. So I can't give you a ton of specifics, but I can sort of guess that it will look kind of like a typical application. Like there will probably be a personal statement, probably letters of recommendation, a transcript, maybe some other paperwork. Probably nothing more exceptional than that. Another pro tip, check your website, your program's website early and often for the most up-to-date information about deadlines and requirements, because you don't want to miss something from them. And another question I get a lot, if you're worried about getting in, you really shouldn't be. Smith students make really competitive applicants to most of these programs. But if you're still really worried about it, you can always apply for a second program as a backup. And I also want to highlight sort of the top 3 reasons that we see students not get accepted into their programs, because I think they're important to be aware of. The first would be applying after the deadline, pretty straightforward. The second would be not meeting eligibility requirements that they've laid out on their website, also a pretty straightforward one. And then the third is a little bit more sneaky. If you apply for a program that's already full, even if the deadline has not passed yet. Right, so a lot of these programs have rolling admissions deadlines, and they can fill up before that deadline. So we always recommend that you apply on the sooner side. Another one that we get questions about is petitioning. When you go to open your study abroad application, you will see a question asking if you would like to petition. And you might need to submit a petition along with your application to study abroad if you don't meet the 3.0 GPA requirement, and that's fine if you don't. I don't know if you guys can hear that thunder. That was a big one. If you don't meet the 3.0 GPA requirement, it's fine if you don't, but you will just need to submit a petition with your application. If you want to study at a non-approved program, right, so a program that's not on that long list that I showed you earlier. If you want to study abroad on 2 different programs during 2 different semesters, or if you want to spend a full year abroad in the UK, Ireland, Australia, or New Zealand, with some exceptions. And so if any of these situations apply to you, or if you think they will apply to you, you should plan to meet with the Dean or Assistant Dean for International Study, including Dean Johnson, who's on this call, by December of your sophomore year. So you've got plenty of time to get that paperwork in. And another really important thing, you need to declare your major before you apply for Smith approval. There's a couple reasons for this. Sort of the biggest being that you will need the support of your major advisor in filling out some of your application paperwork. And we also need to know that you're on track to complete a major, even with going abroad for a semester. So that's a really important one. All right. That was a lot of information that I just dumped on you guys. But here are sort of like the 3 things that I think are the biggest for first years right now to take away. If you guys take away nothing else from anything that I've said in this entire presentation, these are the 3 things that are most relevant to first years in the study abroad process. The first is declaring a major. Again, that doesn't need to happen right now, but you do need to declare a major by the end of the fall semester of your sophomore year in order to meet that February deadline. And again, the reasons being that you'll need your major advisor support and you'll need to know that you're on track to complete your major. But again, as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to study abroad for credit within your major. You don't need to feel like if you're, let's say, a history major, you don't need to feel like you need to pick a history program and earn 16 history credits while you're abroad. You're welcome to do that if you like, but you also are more than welcome to earn any credits that you like while you're abroad. We typically see students earn like some credits for their major and some credits outside their major while they're abroad, just like they would do at Smith. But again, you're welcome to do any combination of credits that you like. All right, the next big one is language and regional preparation. Many, but not all of our programs have language requirements. The general rule of thumb for language requirements is that if we teach the local language at Smith, you need to know it before you go. So if you're going to a Spanish-speaking country, with very few exceptions, you will need to speak Spanish to some degree of proficiency before you go abroad. However, if you would like to go to Denmark, for example, we don't teach Danish at Smith, so we're not going to make you learn it before you go, but the expectation is that you will take Danish while you're abroad. So thinking about language requirements is something that you should do now, especially given registration coming up. A lot of these programs have really different language requirements, right? So some you would need to have like 2 full years of language preparation. But some you would only need 1 year or 1 semester or 3 semesters. So even if you've never taken a language, there is still plenty of time to meet any language requirements that you think you may need to meet. And another one, less common than language requirements, but some programs require some degree of regional preparation. So the biggest example I can think of is if you want to study abroad on the continent of Africa, you need to have taken a class about Africa before you go. So that's also something to look into if you think that that will be an issue for you. And finally, the last thing I would encourage you guys to do is really just think about choosing your program. Like the longer you wait, the more you're going to pigeonhole yourself because you're going to have fewer options in terms of languages because you might not meet language requirements. And the more time you spend planning now, the more options you'll have in terms of major credit. If you think that earning major credit is going to be an issue for you, if you start to plan from your first year to be able to work around that semester, then you will have a lot more options come sophomore and junior year than if you only start to think about choosing your program the moment before applications are due. So right now, as first years, you guys still have so much time to meet those language requirements and to arrange your schedule to something that will work for you. So really think big and have fun. Step 4, study abroad. Questions?
Great. Thanks, Sydney, for that. Great presentation. There's tons of really good information there. We do have some questions in the chat. Okay. One is, you mentioned that tuition will cost the same as it usually would if you were on campus, but will the financial aid you receive in a normal academic year remain the same when paying tuition while studying abroad?
The tuition will cost, yes, it should. Yeah, your financial aid won't change on account of you studying abroad. If some other circumstances change, then, that's out of our control. But yes, it should.
The one caveat would be that, again, Sydney mentioned this, if you have a work study award as part of your financial aid package, that will likely change. But what you're being charged for tuition, room and board, and what you receive in financial aid to cover those expenses should remain the same. It's always a good idea. It's one of the great things about Smith is that there's lots of people to talk to about study abroad. So it's always a good idea if you're thinking about studying abroad to talk to the Student Financial Services and tell them you're planning on studying abroad and ask them, how would those plans impact your financial aid package. We send lots of students abroad. So everybody on campus is pretty well adept at talking to students about that. So definitely a good question.
Yeah, That reminds me of something totally unrelated that I meant to say that I had forgotten to say. But if we go all the way back to the like choosing your program section, I meant to highlight a third resource for choosing your program that I hadn't thought about because we're not physically together right now. But in our, in the physical study abroad office, we have a whole what's called the resource room, and it's full, literally just like floor to ceiling of binders. And in those binders is like all the information you could ever need to know about any of these programs, including kind of importantly, student evaluations. Right, so every Smith student who's ever returned from a study abroad program has filled out an evaluation about the program they went on. And you can read any and all of those hopefully in the fall when the office is open again.
Yeah, thanks for remembering that. I had forgotten it too, Sydney. The other cool thing I think the evaluations serve as a resource is we have them divided by program, and we also have them divided by major. So if you're uncertain what major you want to declare, or if you think you might want to declare a major, let's say in sociology, you can go find the program evaluations from all of the sociology majors who studied abroad, where'd they go, what type of program did they participate on, and so on and so forth. We also ask students about their spending money, how much out-of-pocket expenses they needed to save up for, academic quality, program support, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also, like I said, have them by program. So if you think, oh, I want to go check out the Arava Institute, you can go and find Sydney's program evaluation to see what she had to say about it, like that. So really, really good references and resources and stuff. So
yeah, no, you just reminded me about that when you were saying that. There's lots of people at Smith who are willing to talk to you about study abroad.
Right. Right.
Yeah, there are also on sites right now, if you go into that search program function, like almost all of the programs have at least one student evaluation uploaded, but like if you were physically in the office, you could read all of them. So it's not like we're totally resourceless without the resource room.
Right. So we have a question. Are you allowed to study abroad only once during your time at Smith? Do you want to tackle that one, Sydney, or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So it sort of depends on how long you'd like to study abroad for. Right, so you're allowed for almost all of our programs, you can choose to study there either for just the semester or for the entire academic year. Sort of the rule of thumb is that you can only be off campus for 2 semesters, right? So if you're going to do a full academic year study abroad, that's your one time to study abroad. If you would like to study abroad on 2 different programs during 2 different semesters, then you have to petition for that. The other option is that there are some domestic study away programs, so not studying abroad, but just like other programs within the US that you can exchange to for a semester. So you can do one of those and 1 semester of study abroad, but not more than that.
And then I would just add to that, the fun thing about that is that students can also study abroad during the summer and their interterm, and there's no limits to that. So I have worked with students who have done an international experience almost every year that they've been on campus. A first year student might look for something during the summer, and then the sophomore student might look for like a Global Flex program, which is a short-term faculty-led program being led. Most juniors study abroad, and then seniors who either went abroad and want to go abroad again or didn't get the chance to go abroad usually look for something during the J term. Also for summer, you can do internships abroad through the Lasser Center, and you can use your Praxis funding for that. So in that sense, the combination is limitless, but term time study abroad is just 1 academic year. Cindy, do you want to maybe stop sharing your screen and see if
sure.
people want to ask questions not through the chat? One of the things I can talk about now, because it's a current event, is what is the situation going to look like for study abroad in the future with regards to the global pandemic and things like that. One of the things that we're doing, the college is doing, is we have a risk assessment team who is currently looking at all the different study abroad destinations and looking at what their situation is with COVID, test positivity rates. We're starting to look at vaccination rates and things like that in order to make determinations of where the college feels comfortable that it's safe enough to send students abroad. Because we've seen the evolution of the pandemic improve over time. I'd like to think that by the time you are ready to study abroad, that the situation will be dramatically improved, so that there are more options and more choices for studying abroad. And stuff. So just know now we are looking at metrics right now. We're studying it very, very closely. I'm talking to many students right now in the context of the last thing that Smith wants is to not be able to send students abroad. So, we're doing what we can to find opportunities that are safe enough to do that. And again, as I mentioned, by the time that you might be ready to study abroad, hopefully that the global situation will look dramatically improved. Sure,
yeah, Gabrielle.
Yeah.
Yes. How does housing work while studying abroad?
Yeah, it really varies by program. If you're going to do more of like a direct enroll type program, you might be living in dorms. And then as for the other ones, it really varies. A lot of programs do homestays. Some you live in an apartment. On my program, we lived in sort of like dorm / apartment style housing. That was just, for our program. But it really varies. I think the sort of most common are like dorms, apartments, or homestays. But some programs will give you the option which one you prefer.
One of the things, speaking of that, that's a great question. And one of the things that I would recommend you start doing for yourselves as first years as well is kind of asking yourselves, what kind of program are you looking for? Cindy gave some really good examples of the different types. So do you want to direct enroll in a large university, or maybe consider a field-based program? Answering that question. Do you want homestays, or do you want dorm-like settings where you're cooking for yourself? Do you want to be studying in English, or do you want to be studying in a non-English speaking country? Those kinds of things. Do you want to get credit for your major? Do you want to get credit outside your major? So if you can start thinking about your answers to those questions when you return to campus in the fall, and that's, as Sydney mentioned, really the time that you should be working on narrowing down your options and what you want to do. Having answers to those questions will help you choose your program.
Yeah, for sure. And the earlier you start to think about those questions, the more options you will end up giving yourself down the line. Because if just in your preliminary research, if you find a program that looks interesting to you, that has a language requirement or that isn't necessarily compatible with your major, the earlier you can start to plan for those scenarios, the better.
Any other questions we can help you with out?
I just have a quick kind of like clarifying-ish question. So you said that in the summer, you can do like a summer abroad, and you can do that and then an additional study abroad too. Is that what you're saying? Like you can do one in the summer and then a completely different program in a normal semester?
Yep.
And in the summer one, how would that like financially work? Because it's not like a semester. So would you be like paying that yourself to like study in the summer, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's summer and interterm programs that students are responsible for program costs and expenses. With that said, there are resources and funding resources from the college to help offset some of those costs. And you can apply for an international experience grant to help with that. The Smith Students Aid Society also gives funding for summer and interterm activities. And then most likely the program that you're applying to will offer scholarships as well to students. So the idea is to help offset the cost as much as possible for the summer and interterm options.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is that during the summer, you are not necessarily bound by the list of Smith approved programs. You are welcome to study wherever you like. That being said, when students are looking to study abroad over the summer or over J-term, we always recommend that they start by looking at our list of approved programs, really just because like we know for a fact that those are good, solid programs that Smith students have gone on and enjoyed in the past, and we can vouch for them. But again, you're welcome to go wherever you like.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other, Josie, you have a question for us.
Yeah, I'm looking at the search website, and it seems like there are a lot more programs on there than there are on the sort of 2-page document. Am I wrong about that? Are those also, it seems like some of them are kind of outdated. Like I clicked on a few of the links and it says summer 2020. So does that mean that they're not offered for in the future or sorry, spring 2020? Has that just not been updated? Is that a Smith thing or a those programs thing? What do we do about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the reason for that is if you look in the far right column, you'll probably see that almost all of the ones that are not approved by Smith are say summer and then some year. The reason for that being that those are probably programs that Smith students have gone on over the summer, even though they weren't approved by Smith, and then they applied through sites to get credit. So again, over the summer, you don't need to go on a Smith approved program, but if it's on sites and it only says summer in that last column, that means it's probably not on the list of approved programs.
Okay, so.
Or it's affiliated with an approved program, but it's just their summer program, so it has a different name.
Okay, so the document of approved, the list of approved programs is correct and up to date and should be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I was just going to say, the last column where it tells you which semesters or terms it's approved for is sort of the most important key. I think there's even a way to filter for things that are only for the semesters, not for the summer.
That's what I was going to suggest. You can use the search criteria. There's I believe it's term, and you can search for just fall programs or just spring programs, and narrow down that search a little bit more.
Got it. Thank you. One more question about that.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that it was possible to look at the student reviews or whatever through that website. How can we get to that?
Yeah, so if you click on one of the programs that you're seeing, there should be something that says read a student evaluation here, and then there'll be a hyperlink. If you give me 1 second, I can pull up, I can share my screen. And
while you do that, Cindy, just to clarify too, the program evaluations are only going to be for the term time study abroad programs. We don't ask for study abroad evaluations for students who do summer or interterms.
Yeah, let's see. All right, so you're seeing my search programs?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, as you can see here, interterm 2020, summer 2019, summer 2020, these are not programs on our list of approved programs. That probably just means that a student has gone on them in the past over the summer and sent in a credit application on sites. So let's see, this one academic year is approved by Smith. So let's see, program evaluation. Read a summary of the fall 2016 21st Century City Program Evaluation here. And it's not loading, but you know,
It's there.
in theory, you could read it if you'd like. And then, yeah, for anyone else who's not currently on the website, I can also drop this link in the chat. But you know, you can search, well, this one might not be super helpful. This is just a list of the program providers, but you can search by destination, language, term, you know, academic year, summer only. So lots of helpful things there.
Josie, did you have another question for us?
Yeah, just follow up on that. So I looked at like a different program and tried to click on that same link of read a summary of the blah, blah, blah program evaluation here. And it just brought me to a page that said unauthorized.
That's because if you got into sites from the choosing your program section, it probably means that you're not actually logged into sites. So if there's an option to log in, you can log in with your Smith credentials, and then you should have access to the internet or to those evaluations.
Yeah, so if you just go to the Welcome tab next to the Search Programs tab, under Participant Login, there's like a big button that says like Smith Student Login here, and then you should have full access. Awesome. Any more questions?
I think before we close out, one of the things I'd like to remind all of you as well is to remember that the study abroad process is a process, right? And it needs to be iterative. So as Sydney mentioned, we'll be offering many info sessions in the fall, a general information session. We'll have information sessions by major, by specific programs, and stuff like that, and encourage you to attend as many info sessions as you can. Even the general ones, I recommend attending those at least 2, if not 3 times, because as you go through the process, information is going to make sense to you in different ways at different times. So this is a great start, but definitely, you know, don't let this be the do-all end-all to your info session attendance and stuff.
Sure.
Come to the Global Study Center and ask questions. We will hopefully have open drop-in hours and peer advising hours and so on and so forth. Talk to your academic advisors. We also, on the website, there's a list of faculty members who have been identified in each of the departments as the study abroad advisor for that department. So you can also speak to that person as well, and just have many, many conversations so that you have enough information to make an informed decision about your study abroad. Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Well then, thank you for your time. Thank you, Sydney, for a great presentation and all your useful information. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.